I'm going to be quite unorthodox or heretical, perhaps. This is my chapter in the book. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. These are the authors I mentioned in the book and the works. So I'm a literary scholar, so I come to this from a literary point of view. And you could delineate a history of works, literary works using alchemy. And some of them are more interesting than others, and they are interesting in different kinds of ways. It is interesting that Dante has alchemists in hell in the Divine Comedy, for instance. But is it interesting from an alchemical point of view, if you know what I mean? So I colored this a little differently here, because I asked myself finally, what is a deep use of alchemy in a literary work? Now this becomes sort of subjective. So you're more than welcome to disagree, of course. For instance, it is interesting that a lot of 17th century writers used alchemy, alchemical imagery, motifs, themes, as if it was something normal. They just did it. But among them, I would say that John Milton is more interesting than a lot of the other ones, for instance, in this sense. And then, as we have already heard, alchemy fell out of vogue in the 18th century, and then only to come back again in the yellow part here in the fantastical literature. Is that interesting from an alchemical point of view? I don't think so. William Godwin's novel St. Leon about an alchemist, it's quite a bad novel. It's quite interesting in its way, but it cannot be compared to his daughter Shelley or Frankenstein. That is a real work of art, and she based it on his. So she based it on her father's alchemical novel. But is either of them interesting from an alchemical point of view? If you want, whatever that is, I don't think so. Selma Lagerlöf is somewhat deeper. I won't go into Strindberg. He was so multifaceted, so I won't even go there, although I have written on him. Selma Lagerlöf, I go into her to a more larger extent in my chapter, so I won't do it here. Or Gustav Meyrink. Instead, I just want to ask, is alchemy used in a literary work in a deeper way, if the work is deep in some sense, or does the alchemy has to be, what part does it has to play in a literary work? If, I don't know, some of you might have read Manon Lescaut by Abbé Prévost, a priest. But in it, we have the nobleman main character who falls in love with a common woman, Manon Lescaut. And he realizes that she is unfaithful to him. But he still wants the relationship to go on. And he works different kinds of schemes because she wants money. That's why she is unfaithful. She has a lot of noblemen, courting her, giving her money and so on. And he humbles himself in this relationship with her during the whole book. So it actually becomes quite tedious the way he humbles himself through the whole book. But what happens in the end is that she is arrested for prostitution and shipped to North America. And he follows her there. And then they have to live in poverty. And here in this little town in North America, he says, as for the poverty of our hut and the primitive furniture, you may have noticed that few people here seem better housed and furnished than we are. And besides, I added with a kiss, you are a wonderful alchemist. You change everything into gold. Now, what happened just before this is that she confessed to him. She suddenly confessed, I have been fickle, I have been ungrateful to you, I don't deserve your love, but I'm going to be faithful to you from now on, she says. And so that's why they live here in poverty, they are going to get married, they have a different kind of life. And we can read that this is the perfect place to come to, I said to Manon, if you want to taste the true sweetness of love. Here love is free from self-interest, from jealousy and inconstancy. Our fellow countrymen come here in search of gold. Little do they imagine that we have found far more priceless treasures. What happens is that he is forced to duel, and he thinks he has killed his opponent, so he has to flee the town because he will be executed otherwise. and she wants to follow him, and he says, no, you should stay here. You have a rich man here who wants you. He will pay for all your needs. It is better that you stay in this town. But she follows him out into the wilderness, into the prairie, because she has promised to be faithful, of course. And she was ill already when they left, and she dies out in the desert, the prairie. And we could read that, my soul did not follow hers. Perhaps God did not think my chastisement hard enough, for he has ordained that I must drag on my life in weariness and misery. I have no wish to be happier ever again. There I stayed for more than 24 hours with my lips pressed to my beloved Manon's face and hands, and there I meant to die. And then he buries her and is found seemingly dead on her grave. But now he is transformed after this. So we read at the end of the novel that he explains to his friend that the seeds of virtue that the friend has sown in him were beginning to bear fruit. So this has been a long process, and it mentions alchemy. Should we look upon this as in some way an alchemical transmutation or not? Is it important? I just asked the question. And what about all the other literary works where someone mentions alchemy in different ways? This is Ligeia by Poe, which he thought to be his best novel, by the way. Suddenly we have him mentioning alchemy. Is that interesting it is a masterpiece. It only mentions alchemy. Is it interesting? So when does alchemy become interesting? That is the question. Because actually as a literary scholar, a bit fed up with literary works using imagery for instance from alchemy, when it's not used in a deep, So that's why I mentioned Milton. And going into Milton as a literary scholar is quite a thing to do. So I'm just sort of treading quite lightly here. In Paradise Lost, Milton explicitly refers to alchemy first when Satan lands on the golden sun in splendor likest heaven. So Satan lands on the sun, which is described in terms of metals and precious stones, and also a stone comparable to, I quote, that stone, or like to that, which here below philosophers in vain so long have sought. In vain, though, by the powerful art they bind volatile Hermes. And he also explains that the digestive system of both men and angels is alchemical in transforming material stuff into spirit. So he uses alchemy very elaboratively. Now, in my chapter, I choose to focus on two creatures in Paradise Lost, and it's night and chaos. So night is the old goddess Nyx. They are the theogony, or the depiction of Milton. Milton, in Paradise Lost, the world is created by God drawing out uncreated night from himself. And uncreated night is nothing. And from that, he creates the world. And uncreated night is ruled by night and chaos. Now, one Indian scholar, Malabika Sarkar, she has really gone into depth concerning Milton and alchemy, so I suggest you go to her book if you want to learn more. But she claims that Milton might have gotten the idea of night and chaos from Robert Flood. The problem is that in Flood, night and chaos are present at different points in time, so they are not a couple. So it doesn't really add up in that sense. And I sort of arrogantly or tentatively just suggest that maybe we could look upon them as a sort of alchemical king and queen. But I just blurb that out to see what happens. Because she wouldn't agree, Sarkar wouldn't agree, because the problem is that are they good or evil, and what part do they have in Milton's universe? She looks upon them as evil, but part of the universe, of course, but evil still. But I look upon them as a female and male, motive. Let's see. I go about it in this way. I turn from her to the medievalist and poet Walter Clyde Curry, who in 1947 claimed that this must be from Orphic cosmogony. So in Orphic cosmogony, through Neoplatonism, God first manifested itself as one male and one female entity, which among later Neoplatonists came to be viewed as, for example, night in Homer. And night and chaos are then emanations of the one manifesting throughout the world, for instance, as the sun and the moon, and the question as to whether night begets chaos or not, or vanishes. Sarka looks upon chaos as an offspring of night, and this makes the relationship incestuous and therefore evil, as with Satan and his relationships in Paradise Lost. But if you go to the Orphic tradition, that does not happen. So let's wrap this up with something even more speculative. Milton talks about sable-vested night, eldest of things. This is the oldest. It is often presented as the oldest book of Europe, the Derveni Papyrus. It was found in 1962, burnt in a grave, perhaps an offering. Now, Gabor Beteg, who has translated it and also analyzed it, he comes to the conclusion that according to this manuscript, night is the first being. But also we have Aether, who is a male partner, a bright counterpart of the dark goddess. So we have them in the first generation, even though night was first. It sort of fits perhaps better with Milton than some other interpretations. And if you go to the Derveni Papyrus itself, now I'm no Greek scholar, but if you go to it and read it, you find these kinds of words like fire, fomenting, coagulating, mixes with other things. Of course, we are back 400 years before Christ here, and the four elements, are from that time. So, and has inspired alchemy. I'm not claiming this is alchemy, of course. I'm just saying it's interesting. Whatever the sun dissolves by heating, the night unites by cooling. Those things which the sun heated, and so on. And also we have talks about initiates and magi and their rites in this manuscript. But still, we don't know who the guy who wrote this was. I mean, it just happened to survive, and we have to interpret it afterwards. In Milton, we have, of course, the four elements: eldest night, and chaos, ancestors of nature, hold eternal anarchy amidst the noise of endless wars, and by confusion stand. For hot, cold, moist, and dry, four champions fierce strive here for mastery, and to battle bring their embryon atoms. Now, Milton often mentions night, and I choose to go into night. She is, I would say, even more cool than Led Zeppelin, even though, I think she is cool. I think this is interesting, and it's prime matter in this work. She is prime matter, so she is in some sense alchemical. And Milton mentions her several times in Paradise Lost. He mentions her quite negatively, like a hag, and so on. But also, for instance, haste to thy audience, night with her will bring silence and sleep. This is an old idea because she has a lot of offspring, night. And to the right here, you see it is actually a later sort of reproduction from the chest of Kypselos, which has been lost by night with her children, death and sleep, on a reproduction. Is this alchemy? So that was just a sketch and a way to try to go a bit deeper. Is it deep? Is Milton deep from an alchemical point of view? I think it is, and I think Sarkar does a good analysis of that. But that is an important thing when it comes to literary works of art. Alchemy in itself is not enough. You have to put it into an interesting, context, because otherwise the alchemical part becomes sort of shallow if you don't work it into the system. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What you ask a skeptic who questions almost everything. Milton borrows from alchemy, but the question, as you put it, how central is it? Because he borrows from almost everywhere to create his own universe. Yes. So are you sort of over-representing the importance?
Well, one thing I asked myself is, scholars, they are discussing how can, Sarkar for instance, how can prime matter be evil in Milton if night is evil and chaos? And I would say, I would go back to William Blake when he said, maybe Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. He said that in the 18th century. It's just kind of joking, but it seems to me that he was an artist as well. He was a writer, so night fills a role in his artistic work. And then there are also, of course, religious aspects of it. For instance, if you read Erich Auerbach's Mimesis, perhaps some of you have done, and his analysis on Dante, the benefits of dying in Dante, and even the benefit of going to hell, is to find out your part in the creation. You sort of sit in hell and think, great, now I understand the whole scheme of things. So perhaps Milton wants to work everything he knows into a big scheme of things. Then alchemy becomes part of it because it was a big thing, a biggie in the 17th century in literature.
A question among us Swedes. I think the poet Erik Johan Stagnelius must have been quite influenced in his talk about night and
that is so very interesting. Yeah. But, yes, and he even has a poem to night. But what happened with the Romanticists in the early 19th century in Sweden and was that they took older material and then they turned it into quite friendly kind of creatures. So in him, the night is a friendly being. And in other Romanticists at that era, Näcken is also a friendly being. But if you go back to the 18th century and go back to the ballads and so on, creatures from the woods could be really dangerous. So there was a shift. So he uses night, and I'm not sure how much Orphicism or we find in the Romanticism. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Inspiring. Thank you.